I'm making this video as a bit of a wake-up call to myself. I've been living with pretty much no habits whatsoever. I work from home and I work for myself. I run an accounting and bookkeeping company. And so because I work from home and for myself, I don't really have a boss other than, the only people that I have to be accountable to are my clients. And they're generally pretty flexible because I am an outside contractor. It's not quite the same level of control as a boss would have over an employee, so to speak. Living this lifestyle has definitely got its upsides, don't get me wrong. Like, if I wanted to, I could just go to the gym at 1 p.m. every day when it's not very busy and just get my workout done at half the time because I don't have to wait for anybody. Or, if an appointment comes up and the only time slot available is in the middle of the day, I can just go make that happen without having to burn up a vacation day or something. So, there are definite upsides, and right now it's snowing where I live, so not having to commute in the snow, whether I know how to drive in the snow or not, you can always count on there being other people that don't. It's just going to make your commute a living hell. Not having to do that is definitely awesome, but at the same time, though, that amount of freedom and flexibility means that any schedules that you impose on yourself seem just a little bit arbitrary. Like, there's really no reason to do anything at any given time. With that, there's really no outside influence keeping me to a normal schedule. However, I've come to realize recently that if you don't do that, then things go really wrong really quickly. And that's essentially the purpose of this video, is to highlight the importance of habits. And, I'm going to use the word habits to encompass all the ideas of routine, discipline, scheduling, habits themselves, because it's all kind of the same idea of creating some sort of guide rails for you to live your life upon. You're creating habits with whatever you do. So for me, one of the things that I did was I didn't really create much of a morning routine when I first started. I would just sort of wake up, and if I felt like showering right away, I'd shower. But if I felt like eating breakfast right away, I'd do that. So right away, the A, B of breakfast first or shower first, there was no solid routine. So things always ended up working out that I would do one or the other, kind of at random. But over time, I learned that the more I started to just go for my breakfast first, the more I would then say, okay, well, I'm eating my breakfast, I'll watch a YouTube video, and then that turns into one or two, and then that turns into three or four. And then I'm like, okay, well, I gotta go shower. And by the time I've showered and had breakfast, kind of the two things that people would consider necessary for a morning routine at a minimum, it's already been like an hour and a half or more into my day. And I've wasted so much time. Right. And so it's not exactly a bad thing if you do have that time to waste, but I didn't really find that to be very fulfilling. By the time I got to actually getting to work, it was so much later into the day than I would have liked. So I always had this feeling of being behind. And yeah, the point that I bring up about whether you know it or not, you're building these habits, that's now a habit for me. So without intentionally building it up, I've made it so that it's kind of the habit where I wake up, I go and I have breakfast, and then I go and watch a couple YouTube videos, and then a couple more, and then I go and shower. So whether you know it or not, you're building these habits. So it's better to be intentional with it and to actually make the decisions that you're going to want to stick to, because like I say, whether you realize it or not, you're going to end up sticking to those, and you're going to end up carving out that groove and making that habit more easy in the future. And that brings me into the second point, is that the more you do something, the easier it gets and the harder it gets to stop doing that. And this is a beautiful double-edged sword, because on one hand, it means that the things that you know are good for you, they get easier over time, the more that you do them. However, the things that you know are bad for you, the more that you do them, the harder it is to stop. So a great example of this would be going to the gym. So if you struggle to go to the gym, or you don't find the motivation or whatever it is to go consistently, but then you start to go consistently, you'll find that over time, and pretty quickly too, the joy of going to the gym will start to outweigh the pain of having to go to the gym. And it'll get to the point where it's harder to not go and break your routine than it is to just put your shoes on and go. So that's a great example of where building that habit has allowed me to now be in the place where it's totally on autopilot. I kind of just go, like, without really thinking about it. A certain time comes around, usually in the afternoon, and I'm like, okay, well, it's time to go work out. Let's go do that. And then the opposite is true, where this doesn't apply to me, but let's say that you're addicted to nicotine, like you really like to smoke or chew or whatever it is. The more that you do that, the harder it is to stop, because not only are you reinforcing the actual addiction itself, but you're also reinforcing the habit of it, where whatever it is that you were doing right before you start to do that activity, that starts to be the cue for the habit itself. So one of the best books that I've read in self-improvement was Atomic Habits. I think that's by James Clear. And then there's also a second book called The Power of Habits, I believe. Those two kind of go together. They're not written by the same author, but they kind of share ideas about habits with one another. So I recommend reading them both. But it taught me that habits are essentially a loop of a cue, a routine, and a reward. And so whatever it is that you're doing, the cue is what happens right before it. The routine is the habit itself, the thing itself, whether that's going to the gym or having a cigarette or going to work. And then the reward is the feeling that you get afterwards, or maybe the feeling that you get from the material reward after. So, if you go to work and then you get paid, that's essentially the reward. Or if you go to the gym and you feel stronger and you get that endorphin rush post-workout, that's the reward. Same thing with getting like the enjoyment that you get out of nicotine if you go and smoke. And then that's what reinforces the whole cycle of you want that reward. And so every time you feel that cue, your body craves the routine. And knowing that's how habits work, I've found to be really useful in learning how to get back on track with habits too. So it's not just a matter of, well, these habits are going to happen no matter what. I don't know how to really influence them other than just doing the thing. If you think about it in terms of what the cue is, what your routine is, which essentially the routine is whatever you want to actually be doing. So let's say that you're in my situation where you know that you want to be doing more work on your business. That would be the routine. So you essentially just have to find a cue and then a reward, and just keep doing the thing in between that cue and that reward. And eventually it'll become harder to not do than to do. So again, for my situation here where I don't really have any guardrails. I kind of just wake up whenever, do whatever when I wake up. That's the number one thing that I want to change. I want to get into a habit of going to bed around the same time and waking up around the same time. And I want to have a more solid morning routine. And I'm not talking about like one of those YouTube morning routines where you spend 6 hours looking in the mirror and journaling and meditating and all this stuff. And look, there's nothing wrong with doing any of that. It's just that what I'm talking about is more simple. It's like I just want to iron out the order in which I do the things in the morning. So for me, it's most likely going to be wake up, go shower right away. Once the shower is over, then just go have breakfast, eat the breakfast. Once the breakfast is done, clean up the dishes and get to work. And the more that I do that, the more that'll become a solid habit. So for that specific example, the cue would be waking up. The cue is becoming conscious again. So once I'm conscious, the routine is what I just described: shower, eat, clean, and then work. And the reward would be, well, I guess that's the part that I'm still figuring out. The reward would likely be that I'm feeling more satisfied in my work. I feel like I'm less behind. I would be able to feel like I'm making more money, of course, too, because the more I work, the more money I get, obviously. Given that that's kind of how it works when you work for yourself. Yeah, again, like the more that you focus on your habits, the more your life just becomes what you want it to be. So even in extreme cases where somebody is extremely successful, like I was thinking about the case of Kobe Bryant before this. I'm sure you know who he is, but he's a very successful basketball player. Some people would say he was the greatest of all time. His habit, his routine would be that he would play a ton of basketball and he would practice his skills and everything. And I'm sure that he didn't just do that whenever he felt like it, or he did it at 2 a.m. one day and then did it at 3 p.m. the next. He had a certain routine, and I think I remember watching a video of him describing his routine in the past. But again, these are pretty simple concepts of just create a habit, stick to it. But that second part is the hardest part, and it's so necessary. The final idea I'll leave you with is the idea of consistency. We hear about this in business and especially in the fitness world, where you can work out once, you're not going to see an improvement, but if you work out once a day for 6 years, you're going to be in great shape. That idea of consistency is really what gets you all the progress that you get. And consistency, in a way, is just another word for making it habitual. You know, you can either consistently go to the gym haphazardly by just willing yourself to go to the gym whenever you feel like it, and that may work. But a much better, and I'd say much more likely way of making that work is to create a habit around going to the gym. That way the consistency automates itself over time within your brain. Maybe you have an alarm that goes off to be your cue. That's the gym alarm. And I would hope that you don't set it to the same as your wake up alarm, because that sounds like a great way to make yourself hate the gym. But anyways, yeah, so looking at your life in terms of a collection of habits, I think is really important. That's the wake up call that I'm giving myself, because my habits are essentially zero in terms of habits that I've consciously created, and I'm basically just a meat sack living by the habits that have naturally formed around me. Some of which have been useful, like I said, going to the gym and running is still there, but the work could use some work. So maybe there's more to life than just being a machine of habit, but I think it's a pretty good framework to put yourself around if you want to get to somewhere and you want to actually make it there and be sustainable with it. So, alrighty, thanks for watching. Take care.